Hello, citizens of the Dark Knight Nation, and welcome to this week's episode of Comics Insider. We're going to be breaking down, discussing, and analyzing the Joker 80th Anniversary 100-page spectacular. Now, right off the bat, I want to let you guys know that we will really only be going into depth on my favorite 4 stories from this issue, but I did want to make a comment that I think that across all of these anthology books that DC has been printing as these sort of celebrations of their characters, I think that this one was the most consistent. Not quite the highest highs, definitely not the lowest lows, but there were a solid 6 or so out of the 8 stories that I genuinely enjoyed, and that speaks volumes. So I do want to give the editors and the curators of this book a lot of credit. Now, some very exciting news. We finally opened up our Dark Knight Nation shop. It is a merch store where you can rep the Dark Knight Nation. And aside from that, all of that money gets reinvested back into the channel to improve equipment or provide more content for me to review for you guys. And another way to financially contribute to the channel, if it is within your bounds to do so, is to use the Stream Elements tip link in the description below. With that, any comment or any question that you post attached to your tip will get addressed either in a video or in a stream. So I do want to thank anybody who does contribute and the folks that have contributed already. With that being said, if you happen to contribute $50 or more in one particular tip, I will make a video of your choice. So that is a pretty interesting incentive. But if you want to support the channel in a very free and productive way, if you enjoy this video, please make sure to leave a like, comment down below answering the question of the day. Of course, subscribe to the channel for more, and please share this video with your friends or anybody you think might be remotely interested. Sharing videos is one of the most underrated ways to support your favorite content creators, and if you do happen to enjoy this, I would super appreciate it. If we can hit 60 likes within the first 4 days of this video posting, I will be able to give you guys a free physical copy of the Joker 100-page 80th anniversary, courtesy of my sponsor, AJ's Comics. So make sure you guys stick around till the end of the video to learn how to enter. So with all of the business out of the way, let's get into this book. So for my money, the 4th best story in this anthology book is titled Kill the Batman by Gary Whitta, Greg Miller, and art by Dan Mora. This story opens up with Lois Lane reporting live from the Batcave 3 days after the Batman's apparent death at the hands of the Joker. And she's interviewing a grieving Alfred as he says that even though Bruce never wanted the credit for everything he'd done, Alfred believes that he owed it to his son, that the world understands the sacrifices that Bruce Wayne made for both Gotham and, again, the world as a whole. We then transition to sort of testimonials from another 2 of Batman's greatest allies, Commissioner Gordon and Superman, where Gordon makes direct ties to the Dark Knight film, saying that Batman was the hero that Gotham always needed but never deserved. Superman comments on his immense respect for Bruce, regardless of their differing perspectives on the world and how to best save it. We then move over to a crowd of a ceremony honoring Batman post-mortem, and the Joker's internal monologue debates the dichotomy between himself and the Dark Knight as we close in on a bundle of explosives strapped to his chest. The Clown Prince of Crime suddenly is distracted by an eruption of laughter from the crowd around him. Why is everyone laughing? Their hero was dead, he thinks. Joker asserts that without him, the Batman would have been nothing. They created each other, and with that being said, this is where he realizes that he's the only person in Gotham who's truly sad for the loss of the Dark Knight. The Gothamites have rallied behind the symbol of their hero, but with him being gone, the Joker is nothing. No one to hold up the funhouse mirror to. As the defeated Jester leaves the rally, he realizes that he must find a new occupation for a cold-blooded maniac to thrive upon, and as the story comes to a close, the Joker actually finds his new purpose at a desk in the Gotham DMV. So I kind of just want to wrap up my thoughts on this story, and the writing in particular really provides a great commentary on the balancing act between the dichotomy of Batman and Joker, and how each of them being the best at what they do really heightens the level of importance for one another to balance each other out. And I love the fact that they really lean into the sort of tragedy of what the Joker is without a Batman. Another thing I want to credit the writers for in this story is how strong the dialogue and the monologuing was. Now, usually when writers get very heavily on dialogue, monologue, or really any type of text in a comic book, it can really weigh the story down in pacing. But I felt that it was really organic in the story. It captured the characters very well, so I do want to give the writers a lot of credit. And this story also particularly captures the tragedy and comedy of the situation. It is sometimes very hard to balance those two things, but it was well put off. I loved the kind of jab at the end with the Joker assuming a role of the DMV. It was really funny, and it's really hard for me to appreciate comedy in comics, but I think they really landed it well, and it didn't deprive the really intense character study of any of its weight. So great work on that. Dan Mora is one of my favorite rising artists in comic books. Absolutely stunning costume and character designs, super strong compositions of the panels with great camera angles and shot choices, and those are things that we don't often talk about a lot in comics, but especially because the story is not super intense in terms of like action, he does a very good job at deciding what angles to shoot the scenes from in order to keep the drama fairly high and to imply a level of importance to what's going on. So really, really great stuff. Also, Dan Moore is an excellent character actor, really knows how to make these characters express themselves. And with the Joker, particularly in the story, you can feel his envy, you can feel his hate, you can feel the tragedy and the loss of his quote-unquote best friend, right? Just a really, really solid story. And for this being my number 4, this really says something about the stories to come. So inching out just above that story is my third favorite story from this book, No Heroes, written by Eduardo Medeiros and Rafael Albuquerque, but also drawn by Rafael Albuquerque. And this story is very deceptive. It is simple in terms of plot, but it does a lot with a very, very small amount of real estate. So let's get into it. This story cuts between the present and just minutes prior as a narrative tool. In the present, a young accounting intern sits behind a masked clown, bloody and beaten. In order to learn how we got there, we cut to just minutes before as the intern Ronald is interrupted by the beginning of an armed robbery in the lobby of the bank. Sweat begins to bead down his face while the tingle of anxiety creeps up his neck. Ronald clicks the silent alarm under his desk before sneaking out of the office, only to see one armed clown standing before the hostages. In the present, which is differentiated by a subtle shift to a cooler color palette, one of the clowns monologues about how everyone has a moment where they can decide to be the hero, and yet so few answer the call. The clown says that the mediocrity of their day-to-day lives atrophies the spirit, but Ronald, he's different. He's just an intern, his hope is intact. The clown also acts as an expository viewpoint for the minutes prior, asking if Ronald had ever taken a life before. The young intern manages to whisper out that it was his first, before the clown erupts into a diatribe on how this place was a total waste of heroism. For this young man to waste his life on a company that makes billions off predatory fees and interest charges, with a boss that's sleeping with his mistress next door and won't miss him tomorrow when he's gone. As the clown leans in to point a gun at Ronald's face, we abruptly cut back to just minutes prior as Ronald caves in the head of an armed clown with the back end of the fire extinguisher, only to turn around to a pack of armed clowns standing over his shoulder. We cut back again to the present with the barrel of the gun just an inch away from Ronald's face as he answers the question. He did it for the people. The masked clown then reveals himself to be none other than the Joker, admitting that he has a bit of a soft spot for heroes because sooner or later they become martyrs. The man who laughed crouched back in, shoving his pistol in Ronald's face as the young man braces himself for martyrdom, but he hears the gun sound off multiple times before the Joker tells him to smile. Ronald opens one eye, waiting for the clown prince's punchline, and that's when it hits him. Each of the Joker's men were shot down in cold blood, because according to the King Clown, not everyone gets a second chance with him, telling the boy to make the most of it before he comes back. So right off the bat, I really want to talk about the use of nonlinear storytelling, especially because this isn't told over a very long amount of time, kind of chopping it up and reevaluating how the expository information is being delivered and how the drama is kind of unfolding was really, really smart. And it's well coupled with this kind of cinematic use of widescreen panel layouts and these really smart, intimate camera angles. You could really really dig into this and figure out what each camera angle is accomplishing. But Raphael Albuquerque is very deliberate in his choices there, and the way he's inking his work and spotting the blacks really helps to set the tone. It adds a lot of depth to the situation, but he's also really great at the transitioning from the really, really, really dark spotted black into, colors or whatever other texture he's trying to accomplish. It just really helps to set up the tone. This story also had very, very strong, engaging dialogue, especially with this being such an intimate story. It's really on the back of that dialogue, and it does a good job of not overpowering the story, not dumbing down the pacing. It actually really helps to push it forward. It's smart, it's clever, it's just solid dialogue, and it's not something that people talk about enough in comics and give good dialogue enough credit. So this was excellent. And I liked just generally how resonant this story was with the Joker's tendencies and how he can be unpredictable. Just a solid job. Another good nod to the art was the great color palette shift between the past and the present. I know people use that a lot, but I like the very deliberate color choices that were made and how subtly they articulate the cutting between past and present. But overall, I definitely give this story at least an 8.5. I really enjoyed it, and it's definitely worth reading. With that, let's get into number 2. So my number 2 pick for this Joker anthology is Scars by Scott Snyder and Jock. This story opens with a flashback of a boy staring at a flower with a monologue running over the scene, and through the monologue we learn that the boy's grandparents were hiders from the old country, using animal hides to bind books, make gloves, and a number of other things. This flower was given to the boy by his grandparents, each petal a different kind of skin, and it's supposed to be a treasure, but the boy's brother was unrelenting in his teasing, so he flushed it down the toilet, never to be seen again. And in the present, we pick back up with the boy long grown into an old man, a psychologist on one side of the desk, the other his patient, a victim of the Joker toxin. And so our POV character has treated dozens of victims before, and this is the most important step. The doctor prompts the Jokerized GCPD officer to put on his mask, which is a metallic construction meant to reshape the dastardly grimace of the Joker toxin into an unassuming gesture. And Dr. Reader notices that his patient is afraid to heal, afraid to return back to normalcy, because if he does, the Joker will return to bring it all tumbling down. And even though the psychologist tries to convince his patient that the Joker is just a man, the former GCPD officer argues that the Clown Prince of Crime is more than that. He knew his fears, the vain terror of something happening to his smile. The doctor tries to convince the man that he was just collateral, nothing more. The intent of the Joker is to trick his victims into believing that he is the embodiment of their nightmares, when in fact, it's just a gag brought about by his own genius. Nevertheless brilliant, but still only a man. The Joker takes after the playing card of his own name, and just as the card is mutable, taking on any numerical value needed to win, the man who laughs becomes the visage of what frightens you most. More a mime than a clown, really. But one day the doctor saw what the Joker really was, and in his cell within Arkham, without the pomp and circumstance, all he saw was a broken, beaten man. As Dr. Reader's anecdote comes to a close, Gary interrupts him by dropping the metallic mask to the ground, unconvinced of the doctor's position. Later that night, Dr. Reader awakens from his sleep, and as his eyes crack open, the flesh flower rests on his nightstand. Juxtaposed over the scene is his voicemail left for Bruce Wayne just hours earlier, where he lays claim that he'll show the Joker's victims that the villain is merely flesh and blood. Reader inches his face closer to the leathery flower when it belches out a familiar green liquid. Dr. Reader turns to the camera, his face is melted down to nothing more than blood-saturated tears of skin and blistering muscle tissue. As he falls to the ground, his voicemail reemerges as he tells Bruce that they'll make the world see the Clown Prince for what he really is, that Bruce can call on him and he'll be right there to help him do it. But when the doctor thuds to the ground, a twisted smile materializes from the darkness underneath his bed, followed by a pale, encroaching hand. Now, although this was my second favorite story of this book, I think that it was pretty monologue heavy, and although most of the other stories that I've accounted in this video are also monologue heavy, this one really did end up slowing down a bit of the pacing. It wasn't horrible, but I could definitely feel the story dragging on because of all of the time being filled having to read, kind of this character's diatribe and that character's diatribe. It's a very Snyder thing to do. He does like to kind of explicitly tell you what the themes are, and sometimes it works, other times not so much. I didn't totally dislike it, but it's certainly something worth talking about. I also found it to be a bit of a stretch, that the patient's reasoning not to heal was that he thought the person would come back. I've seen a lot of people go through trauma, and sometimes, just the trauma in and of itself is paralyzing enough, and I don't think he needed to go that far. That's a very, very small personal nitpick that I thought it was definitely a leap of faith to kind of make that the reasoning as to why the patient didn't want to heal. But it was ultimately a great elaboration on the way he characterized Joker from his Batman run, and it articulates the character's true depth of evil and why he's so menacing and why he's so permeable and why he's also so mutable, what you can do with this character and how many things you can kind of use the Joker as a vehicle of ultimately. It had a really solid setup, and it really broke down who the Joker is and why he's so fearsome. Art-wise, Jock is Jock. He has a great choice of shot compositions throughout, and particularly a great use of deeper black backgrounds so that he can articulate certain figures in the foreground. But yeah, ultimately I would give this story a solid 8.7. It was good, definitely a few nitpicks, but solid story. Okay, so we're finally moving into what I think is easily the best story in this anthology. 2 Fell into the Hornet's Nest by Brian Azzarello and Lee Bermejo. Right off the bat, Lee Bermejo's art is totally non-typical, and it's a sort of merger between his painterly style with muddled colors, but the line work is kind of evoking Golden and Silver Age art. And the story opens up with the Joker being escorted through Arkham Asylum after enduring a form of shock treatment. And as the Clown Prince of Crime lugs around the other inmates, drool drips from his chin before he explodes in laughter and a fit of nonsense. Sometime later, the inmates surround a card table as a fight erupts. The group is hosed down by none other than the dynamic duo, their designs echoing a transition between the Golden and Silver Ages of comics. Batman and Robin taunt the incarcerated rogues before we cut to the Joker screaming pure insanity at a static-riddled TV. He creates a news scenario of a 5-alarm fire tearing through Gotham Elementary, only to continue into fits of mayhem, torture, and nuclear holocaust. We pick back up with the Joker and a hallucinated Batman, taunting him again. In a fit of rage, the Crown wraps the guillotine grip around the throat of the Batman, and when he's escorted away from the empty table, the Joker questions the cycle of their conflict, the loop of perpetual wacky battles between the two during the Golden and Silver Ages. With the shock therapy only yielding brief results, the doctors of Arkham Asylum strap him down for something else. The nurse makes these very self-aware, kind of four-dimensional comments about how he doesn't belong in the loony bin. The Joker is a brand to be printed on pajamas and lunchboxes and merchandised. The Joker argues that he's a sociopath, a homicidal maniac, but she cuts him short. All that angry nonsense, it's just sizzle, PR. You're a brand and children love you. Azzarello really aptly points out to how merchandising and marketing these characters like the Joker completely neuters them and their storytelling potential for the sake of making a dollar. It's very superficial and ultimately a detriment to these characters. He takes jabs at the publisher's tendencies to manipulate them, all for really nothing because they eventually return back to what they are at the core. And we then cut to the aftermath, a lobotomized Joker, saliva crawling down his face, when he notices a whimpering Batman under the covers of his bed. A brief smile returns to the clown's face before he pulls the covers, only to find a naked and neutered Batman in a curled up, fetal position. As the issue closes, Joker escaped from the asylum, bidding a goodbye to his old friend, leaving Gotham just as the Joker was absent from continuity sometime between the end of the Silver Age leading into the Bronze Age. Man, I really enjoyed how layered this story was. Azzarello and Bermejo really set up this excellent critique of how marketing and merchandising and kind of brandizing these characters is ultimately a detriment to what they represent and the story potential that they carry with them. Azzarello does a very good job at using very strong, exaggerated dialogue and characterization to kind of hammer home the themes, but they never feel heavy-handed, which is really great, and I love that he has such a relationship with Bermejo that he lets the art breathe, he lets the art do the work. Visually, at least. He doesn't over-explain things when he knows that Lee Bermejo can accomplish everything on a narrative level that needs to be done. And regarding Bermejo, he has this great satirical take on Golden and Silver Age art with the muted colors and this kind of old horror comic aesthetic to drive the critique. Very, very strong visual symbolism throughout this, from the neutered Batman to the lobotomized Joker to the rapidly kind of shifting aesthetic styles of the Joker throughout this story. And the character acting was on point. I really, really dug this, and I think that the ultimate message as to kind of how the big two sometimes treat these characters as nothing more than a way to make a quick buck to the cost of what they are at their core is so spot on, man. I really, really, really enjoyed this story, and it had a lot to say, and there are more layers than I can really explain honestly in a couple of minutes, but that's kind of the gist of it. There's just so much great symbolism, some callbacks to his Batman Damned run, just a solid story, a solid 9.4. I very much enjoyed it, clearly, but I'm curious, what do you guys think? Have you read this story? If you have, what was your favorite? If not, just by maybe the brief explanation that I've given throughout these summaries here and these reviews, which seems the most interesting to you? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe down below for more content like this, and all of those things will help you earn the opportunity to win a free copy of this book. So in order to do that, like I'd mentioned prior, we have to hit 60 likes within the first 4 days. I think that's very reasonable for a $10 comic book. Again, you must be subscribed to the channel and comment down below answering the question of the day. Now, one of the easiest ways to do that is to share this video. Get this to more people. The more likes we get within the 4 days, the closer we get to the giveaway. And that's all thanks to my sponsor, AJ's Comics in Colchester, Connecticut. They are my local comic book store, and what's really great, they have a 10% off discount for all of their comic book subscriptions, and with that, they will mail them to you. Any orders $100 or more, shipping is absolutely free within the United States and on United States military bases internationally, which is super, super cool. 100% awesome store, and I can't recommend them enough, so make sure you guys go show them some love. You can find the link to their Twitter and their website down below. But big thanks to AJ's Comics for putting me in a position where I can give you guys some free comics. And at the end of the day, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to go check out the Dark Knight Nation shop or to contribute to the channel using the Stream Elements tip link down below. Thank you guys so much for the support, and I will catch you guys in the next video from Dark Knight Nation.